Hey folks, welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. Thank you for tuning in as always, and I appreciate you being here following 100-something episodes. So I'm excited to continue to keep doing this show and that people are listening to it. So I appreciate you being here. Hope you're having a good day, and I hope that if you're in the middle of trying to get and achieve a goal, that you have a plan and you got a clear vision of what you want to do, and I hope things are going well. That's kind of going to be a reoccurring theme today, because my guest on the show today is comedian and actor Jason Salmon. Jason, you may have seen him on Orange is the New Black, a couple of different TV shows, and he's also been in several national commercials. I know him from when I first moved to New York City. I would go and do the earliest open mic that I would do most of the time, usually Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, was at Standup New York, which is a comedy club in the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And I was working at Starbucks at the time, and I would usually be doing an open mic late the previous night at the People's Improv Theaters. Those would usually start around 11, and I would get home to my apartment at Sunset Park, where I was living at the time, usually at like 2 in the morning, and then I would have to wake up at 4 or 5 to go work, get to work by 6. And I have this very clear memory on multiple occasions of leaving work early, because I would work like 6 a.m. to like 11:30, noon, and then have my entire afternoon off. And I wanted to do comedy, but I didn't want to go home and then have to go all the way back into the city to do shows. So a lot of times, and I talked to Jason about this a lot of times what I would do, and this is, I can't say I would recommend that anyone do this now, but it's what I did at the time. And in the midst of it, I was kind of thinking, hey, I'm grinding it out here. So what I would do is I would go to Central Park, which is near Stand-Up New York, and I would usually sleep on a bench for a couple of hours. I must have looked like I was like on heroin, because I was just like trying to stay awake and then like doing that sort of like in and out of consciousness thing. But that's what I would do. And then the other thing is, that particular mic, you would have to, it went in order of sign up, I believe, for a while. And if you got there earlier, you could do that mic, and then you could run and do another quickly. And when I first got to New York, it was all about how many times could I get up on stage every single night was the goal. And I'm glad that I'm not, I have other things that are occupying my time now, and that I am still doing comedy, and that I'm not sleeping in the park. So we're going to talk a little bit about those days, and Jason also does a fair amount of work as an actor, so we're going to talk about that, and just kind of like the often forgotten magic of making a room of people laugh as a comedian, which I think is easy to forget if you're in the middle of trying to make this a career, and you're starting to think more strategic about how you're going to make a career in comedy. There was a time when we all did this, and we were just doing it because we loved it. And I definitely remember those days, and try to always hold that kind of feeling in like my heart and soul. And we're going to talk about that a lot with Jason, and I hope you guys enjoy it. I think you will. And if you guys enjoyed the show, this is something kind of like a little call to action I'll do. If you're listening to this and you haven't reviewed the podcast on iTunes, if you were able to and want and willing, I would greatly appreciate that. That's a little small thing that kind of helps boost the overall profile of the show on Apple. And then we are also on Stitcher and Spotify. If you want to add us to your fave playlist on Stitcher, that would be tremendously helpful. And I would be grateful. So thank you guys very much for listening. And let's go to my chat with Jason Salmon. Yeah. Of course, if everything catastrophically collapses, as it is wont to do, you might be getting a call from me in
Yeah.
the future.
You know, hey, no problem.
Yeah. But it's good to see you, man. I don't think I've seen you for like 6 years.
It's been a little bit.
It's been a while.
You know what's weird is that there are certain people with Facebook that I'm like, I feel like that's my connection to them, and they are these vestiges of periods during my stand-up comedy career.
Yeah.
So there's, it's just like, oh, this person's here and this person's here and this person's doing this, and it's, you know, and so I still feel connected on a certain level, which is weird. I don't normally love to sing the praises of social media, especially Facebook, but that is a real valuable component of that.
Oh, it definitely is. I think so, because for all the negative things that social media has brought us, and the fact that I fight with people I agree with all the time now, not publicly but in closed groups, there is still something to like, oh, I haven't seen that guy because I haven't seen that guy in like years. Is he doing well? Oh, he is. Okay, good. And you're like one of those guys that is doing well, at least from what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I'm doing all right. You know, I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking about you have to achieve a certain level of success to feel sad about your career.
Yes.
There's a weird like you have to get past, like at the beginning, that's the one weird thing about stand up is you start stand up and there's this excitement, like every single moment is this and not every single moment. That's probably a little micro inaccurate. But
Sure.
But like you have these distinct strides, and your first laugh at an open mic, your first open mic, you have all these firsts and these things where you're exploring a bunch of different possible avenues of success, and of course your hope. And your hope is at such a high level, and your recognition of the actuality of the difficulty of stand-up is maybe at a low enough level that the gap between those two allows you to fill it with this weird sort of enthusiasm and adrenaline.
Yeah, and like the enthusiasm is what carries you through all of that kind of nonsense that comes with it being the entertainment industry.
Right, but even at that point, you're not really totally in the industry. You're essentially a hobbyist who's looking to make it into a business.
Right.
And so there's that point where you're the hobbyist, and it's a lot more thrilling than it necessarily is business-like. And once it becomes business-like, there's this weird. Everybody I know, no matter how great of a comic they are, and in New York City, you're surrounded by comics who are phenomenal, amazing, and every single one of them wishes they were a little further, a little better, a little, you know.
Yeah, I think about that all the time, because I think about comedians that I look at and I'm like, oh, that person's on Comedy Central, or oh, that person is on Netflix. They must be doing great and feeling great about themselves, and not in the slightest.
No, I was talking to Lynn Koplitz not long ago, and she's got this iconic joke about rape, and it's just a great joke because it's about this woman who just takes back the power from the rapist immediately by doing all of the things that men stereotypically hate about women.
Sure.
And it's just such a great joke, and it's this sort of I'm every woman type joke, but also this is how a rapist wouldn't want to rape me, you know, sort of level of just deep, like just layers and layers and layers. Hilarious. Killer joke. Iconic. She was talking, she's like, I feel like I'm just a one joke person. I'm like, you've got tons of great jokes. This one became iconic, and you're a little irked that you don't have more than one iconic joke. But that's what it is. It's very much, in order to succeed, you have to have some level of, this I don't have, this I want to do, this I want to accomplish.
Exactly, that never being satisfied. And then one thing I think about, and the analogy I make is to professional wrestling, because professional wrestling has so many people that get like to the very top
Yeah.
of the industry, and like they're super famous, getting all of like they're going on like late night talk shows and getting paid all this money.
Right.
Then it's just a fight to keep everyone else down.
Yeah.
Because like the next popular person that comes up, okay, I have to, like, I've seen there's so much stuff on YouTube about like your favorite wrestlers from the 80s that are actually just like, oh, these people were sabotaging the careers of people so that they wouldn't lose their spot.
Wow. That's so terrible.
I know. I don't know if there's anything like that in the comedy world, but I imagine somebody somewhere.
There's some. I don't think it is a general business practice. I think there's a weird element because stand-up comedy all by itself is, if you are going to pursue that, you're going to have to do it as a singular entity.
Yeah.
And it's very lonely, and it's very separate from other people. So it's not like you're as much in contact as you're traveling from place to place, or you have to be extremely collaborative, and you need to work with people and hire people and have people you trust and have people have people how that will talk to you and tell you when something isn't working, like all of those things. There's this weird dual life of comedy that doesn't lend itself to sabotage. Not to say that it's not out there and it hasn't happened. I've seen it happen. I've seen people do stuff, and I'm like,
But then you just eventually, because when you think about the beginning, when we're all just like enthusiastic hobbyists, we're around each other almost every night, and then as people either succeed in stand-up or they evolve and branch out their creativity in a different way, you become more and more isolated from those people.
Right.
Like I remember, and I don't know if you remember this, I used to see you at Stand Up New York to do that mic all the time. And I don't know I don't think I ever told you this, like just in passing, but most of the time if I was doing that mic, I had gotten off at like 11 o'clock in the morning from my shift at Starbucks and had been sleeping in the park all
really
day. Yeah.
That's crazy.
I would be on like 3 or 4 hours of sleep because I had been coming home from the pit mic usually the night before it starts at 11.
Okay.
And then I would wake up at 4 to get to the store by 6, then get off work at 11:30 and then just go sleep in Central Park.
Oh man.
I wouldn't do that now, but I don't regret that I did.
No, it's one of those things where there's this base nature that you're feeding with stand-up, and that allows you to sort of be an animal and just survive things. Like there's things that I did that I'm like, I just wouldn't.
What are some of those things?
But they weren't even anything like that. But it was. But I mean, it was like sleeping in cars, in order to get to a spot where they didn't have a hotel for me, but I'm like, I don't have any money to get a hotel, but I'll sleep in a car and I'll do this gig, and it's just like I would be like, I wouldn't do that ever.
Yeah, I can't do it now. Is that like early? When were you sleeping in your car?
Well, that only happened once, but it was when I was trying to get bigger sets. I was trying to do a feature for people and do things like that. So this was when I was past the 15-minute set. Mm-hmm. I was trying to do 25s, 30s, at least that. I wasn't where I could headline. But I remember somebody offering me a gig to quote unquote headline somewhere in Pennsylvania, I think. Quote unquote headline, but for 25 minutes. And I was like, well, okay, this is the perfect segue in my head, which it's nothing. It's 25 minutes. It's got nothing to do with what you name it, and that in retrospect is probably their way of saying, look, we want to tell you you're headlining, so you're not going to need as much money. Because clearly somebody who headlines would never take this gig.
Of course.
So we're going to tell you you're headlining. And they look, to be fair, I was ready to do 20, 25-minute sets, and that gig probably had multiple people before and after me who were only ready to do 15-minute sets.
Of course.
So, I mean, but it's this weird thing where you know that they're sort of screwing you, but you know also that you're sort of screwing them because you hadn't really proven yourself. Because like a comedy club, I wouldn't have gone into and said, "Oh, I can do 25 minutes."
Right.
If I want, because it's not something I would do somewhere where I wanted to work again.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you're trying to get past at like the stand or something like that, you're not going to overinflate.
Right.
Because that just necessitates a long line of you just being at LOL every night.
And they know comedy too. So
Yeah.
when you get up there and you say I'm going to do 20 minutes and you have 10 minutes, they know that.
Mm-hmm.
After after you've used up all your 10 minutes. I mean, maybe you're good enough at crowd work, maybe the crowd's hot. You milk a few extra minutes here
Sure.
and there, and maybe you can get away with it. And there are people who I honestly think are much better at that than others. Chris DiStefano, I think, did a lot of things in his career where he didn't exactly have the quote-unquote time
Sure.
of material, but he had such charm and capacity to interact with the audience and throw his material out in little bits and chunks that I think he was able to take 10 minutes and make it into 20 minutes.
Sure, yeah.
Whereas I could not have done that.
No, me neither. Like even when I first started and I was very much in that very slow deadpan one-liner mode.
Yeah.
I grew out of it mostly just from being in New York every single night. But for the past 9 years. But to compensate for lack of time, I would just go very deliberately when I first
Really?
to stretch
just
for time.
go slow.
Yeah, because when I was
great.
in Baltimore, I would have a couple of good sets, and then you get offered this thing, and you don't want to say no because again, you just
Of course,
you
yeah.
want to get on the stage, need that stage,
Yeah.
and I would just kind of figure it out as I was going along.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of it too, is you sort of, the first time I started running 20-minute sets was when I was doing a show. I would do this show regularly at Broadway Comedy Club, and I would be the first comic up.
Right.
And I was always told you're doing 10 to 12.
Mm-hmm.
No problem. Get up there, ready to do 10 to 12. The first time I did it, I shortened some jokes, and I did, because I was like, I'm going to really just pop, punch.
Yeah.
I'm going to have them rolling. It was great. Got to the 12-minute mark, 15-minute mark. I'm like, this feels like longer than 12 minutes, in my head. And I didn't have an exact, but I'm like, I haven't seen the light yet. And the light's not on. So clearly something is different. So I remember hearing the recording, and I think I went into crowd work at the 17-minute mark.
Yeah.
To just sort of shuffle and try to figure out what I was going to do material-wise.
Right.
And I did. I had some material there, but I sort of was forced into doing that, and I was like, that's never going to happen to me again.
Right. I'm going to be prepared for that situation.
And weirdly enough, that show, for whatever reason, I did the 10 to 12-minute opener spot probably over the course of a year. I probably did it 50 times.
Yeah.
And not 50 times, probably 35 times.
Mm-hmm.
But of those 35 times, probably 25 of them, I ended up doing 20 to 25 minutes. Because for whatever reason, the second comic was always late. And it was different comics. It wasn't the same comic. It was always different comics. But
wow.
I don't know if it's just something with the trains on it. It was a Friday night show, and it was always a big crowd, always a good crowd. It was down in the big room in Broadway.
Yeah.
Not sure what the thing was. Maybe it was a train issue, maybe whatever, but the comics were never there on time. I mean, you look back and you know that Broadway is not the highest in the echelon of comedy clubs.
Sure.
So I do think that some comics probably were like, it'll be okay if I'm late.
Sure.
Maybe that played into it, but I still, even that, I don't I have a hard time being late, no matter how little I might value something.
I'm kind of the same way. Even if I was like, if I've got like multiple spots in the night, I always try to like, I at least tell the second show like, hey, I have this show starts at this time, so I need to go like more towards the middle, and then you keep updating.
Right.
And I would run into that when I produced a show for a while. I would like have this idea of the order, and then I would be getting these constant updates about, okay, well, we're going to change that.
Yeah.
And, okay, I'm going to go downstairs and say, is anyone a stand-up comedian? That happened a couple of times.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of why I have always thought that hanging out is a good thing, period. Mm-hmm. Just because you never know. You never know what's going to happen.
No, and really don't.
I have been sitting in bars, and I had people go, can you do 15 minutes? And I'm like, yeah. and it's
great.
And I get paid. I mean, like, sometimes you get paid. Sometimes, it's like, this is sort of cool that I was just hanging out, and it's like, we need somebody with a skill set. Is anybody here a doctor? Is anybody here a doctor of words?
Exactly.
And I'm like, I'm a doctor of words.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, Harrison Greenbaum, when he did the show, he told me about like opening for Paul Mooney at Caroline's.
Yeah.
And there would be times where he would be doing like 10 minutes before he showed up. And then there were times where he had to do like 75 minutes. Because because that's what
it is.
Because you get the light when Paul shows up. And
right.
I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, you just but that's sort of a cool skill set to have.
Oh yeah.
To be able to go, this may be 10 minutes long and you're going to enjoy this 10 minutes like crazy. Or it may be 70 minutes long and you're going to enjoy that like crazy.
Yeah. That's what I think that like all this talk about like, what's a real comedian and what have you. That I think is one of the traits of what a real comedian is. That ability to like, okay, we told you you're doing 10 minutes. We're going to need you to stretch that to 60.
Yeah, no, it's great. I agree. I think very much being a real comedian is being able to do the grunt work, being able to save an emergency.
Yeah,
I mean that's what being a real anything is sort of like we have this thing, we need this skill set to save this thing, and that is why it's very much like being a real doctor is like I saved a life. Now I'm a real doctor. I mean I'm sure that people feel like real doctors when they cure somebody's flu and things like that. But when somebody saves a life, you have to think that person goes home and says, this is what it takes. This is why I wanted to be a doctor, to change something, to make something better.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
So, I think comedy translates best to the real world in that way.
I think so. And it's like, it's maybe not the most sexy part of being a comedian, like the stuff that gets like would get a lot of likes on Facebook.
Right.
That's different from like, oh, I'm doing Conan, or oh, I'm doing this festival or what have you. But that's the gig.
Yeah,
that's at the core of it.
And I think that's the sort of weird thing is that everybody from the outside looks at comedy as the sexy parts of it. And I think the longer you're inside of it, or the more experience you have being inside it, the more you respect the grunt work, the blue collar comedy work, no pun intended, not the actual tour.
Sure.
But like the getting your hands dirty of comedy.
Oh yeah. And that ability to, and this is part of like my maturing as a person also, the ability to say, even if I don't find this person funny, they are good at comedy.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. Comedy's so subjective, and that is what has helped me when things don't feel like they're paying off as I would want them to. Mm-hmm. Is that you go, look, that doesn't mean you're not funny. There is no person on earth whose opinion is the exact truth about who I am. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if they hate me or they love me. Neither one of those people is 100% correct. Something, based on the actuality of the thing. It's their perception and that color of that thing that creates this world that happens to dictate whatever they're in charge of.
Yes.
I told I told one of my friends the other day. I'm a like lifelong optimist, so I'm real good as a periodic somebody to bounce something off of in
Sure.
comedy, because a lot of depression running out
Oh,
there.
yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, so I was telling my friend, I said, look, just because they're in charge doesn't mean they're not stupid.
See, that's the kind of advice, like, I imagine if you and I, in some alternate universe, imagine if we were like forklift drivers.
Yeah.
And we had some boss who's like 400 pounds, wears a dress shirt that is 3 sizes too short for him, and just hurts my feelings every
Yeah.
day. That's you're the kind of friend that I need in that situation.
Yeah, I'm that guy. That's my job, is to be that one guy that sits on the front porch when somebody comes by and they can't figure out their life, and I look like the dumbest guy, but I just say something that somebody goes, huh, you know what, he's right. That dumb guy's pretty right.
Exactly.
So that's my job in life, is to be that guy. I whittle. I'm on the front porch whittling, and on the front porch of life.
Yeah,
whittling.
you definitely give off that sort of like old folksy wisdom kind of vibe. I don't know if it's the accent or what.
It's a little bit of that. I actually have a character that I created online. That's this cowboy character who explains holidays to people. And I just filmed something with Comedy Central for 4th of July.
Oh, awesome.
So that'll come out. So look for that. But it's that character. It's this sort of like, look, I don't know a lot, but trust me. And it's not, and it's playful and it's funny and it's goofy and silly and dumb, but
It's valuable.
It is, yeah. It's sort of like, that's an interesting way to look at this, sort of thing.
Totally.
That's my success. That's where I measure success. Is like, okay, I figured this out, sort of.
It's good to, I mean, in a life where you so rarely get to figure anything out, I think that's important to have. Do have a question for you.
Yes.
In terms of your origin, you're from Texas.
From Texas, yes.
Okay. Now I'm from Maryland.
Okay.
Now, in your experience, you're being from Texas and from Maryland, are either of us from the South, or are neither of us from the South?
Texas views itself as its own country, which it was at one point. My parents have a land grant from the president of the Republic of Texas that was given to like a great-great-grandfather somewhere down the line. So it was its own country, and I think that a lot of people who have lived in Texas for multiple generations still view it as its own country. We view everyone as foreigners a little bit.
Gotcha.
We don't consider ourselves, I mean, if you were to designate it geographically, I think it would fall under the auspice of the Southwest. But it's sort of like Texas, and then the Southwest begins. And we're definitely not the Southeast, and we're definitely not the Deep South.
Yeah, I would agree. I've been to Texas. I haven't spent too much time in the Southeast, but like Nevada, I wouldn't call like the Southeast. When I think of like the Southwest, I mean, I think of like this kind of like Native American style, like beaded blankets.
Yeah. New Mexico, Arizona.
A lot of turquoise stones kind of thing.
Yeah, lots of that going on in New Mexico.
Yeah, but Texas, I think of real country music, big Austin, and like really big steak.
Oh yeah,
Those are like my
Texas. And the weird thing is big steak and sometimes cheap steak. Like the food doesn't cost that much and it's big.
I like that about it down there.
Huh?
I like that.
Yeah, I do too. You gotta go to the right places. We once went to this one steakhouse where they were noted for these huge steaks and cheap, and we were just like all took a field trip there, just a bunch of people, and we go there, and we're talking to this woman as we're ordering our food, and literally as we're talking to our waitress, a roach climbs over her shoulder like a parrot for a pirate, as if it was a sidekick. I just sat there like for a second. And we're like, oh God, oh, this makes so much sense now.
Right.
We didn't need to know the construct of the economics of the place, and we learned it right there. Did we stay and eat our steaks? Yes, we did. Of course we did.
I would.
We
too.
were hungry,
Yeah.
And you just got to be a lot worse than that to make us not hungry.
Absolutely. What part of Texas are you from?
I'm from Dallas area.
Dallas.
My father is from East Texas, and my mom's from West Texas and New Mexico. So they both grew up partly in Texas for their childhood.
Gotcha. And I know Dallas is a major city, but what's kind of like the vibe there? Like Austin is very weird and artsy, but what's kind of like the vibe in Dallas?
The best summary, if you ever want a concise summary of all of Texas and how it's different from one another, there's a scene from the movie Bernie that had Jack Black and Shirley MacLaine in it.
Okay.
Great movie. The best East Texas accent because they had actual people from the town. Great concept. He did this as if it was a documentary, but of course Jack Black starred as the main guy and Shirley MacLaine was the main woman. But he talked to all the townspeople because the film was made about 15 years after the actual event took place, so they were all just 15 years older. So he talked to all the actual townspeople about it as if they were doing a documentary. And I'm sitting there with my girlfriend going, I'm like, that is the best East Texas accent I have ever heard in my life. And then 2 minutes later, I'm like, those are real people. There's no way those are actors. Those are real people.
Yeah.
And they were. But anyway, there's a scene in there where he describes all the different parts of Texas and how they differ from one another, and it's a great scene. It sums it up real quickly. But in short, Dallas it made its money off of banking, and it was a little wealthier.
Sure.
And that was sort of its thing. It wasn't an oil place, but it made money off of the oil industry, that sort of thing. There were a lot of wealth went to Dallas.
Gotcha. Kinda like
Fort Worth is sort of its sister city, but it's more of a stepsister city. It's a different thing. It's called Cowtown. Because it made its money off of the ranching industry. Two vastly different cities that are just like 20 miles from one another. Really close, but like so different.
Yeah, so you have like money made in air-conditioned buildings versus money made out in 105-degree summer heat.
Yes, but even then, like all of those things, like these guys were in Dallas were investing. It was a lot of banking that really fed Dallas's growth.
Yeah.
But in Fort Worth, they were still making a lot of money in air-conditioned places, but they were making it off of cattle.
Gotcha.
It's called Cowtown. In fact, they actually release cattle in the stockyard section of town. They release cattle and let them wander around the square for a lap for tourists.
I feel like I've seen that. I feel like I've seen a video of that. I was doing some research on Fort Worth for a thing I'm writing.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, okay. So kind of like. So a little bit more of a well-to-do area. And what was your life like growing up? What did your folks do?
Both my parents were educators. My mom was a teacher, and my dad was an administrator for most of my life. So he was a principal. He was a high school principal for most of my childhood.
And what grade did your mom teach?
She taught originally. She taught high school, and she taught classes that were taken by all grades. Like I think she taught. Like home economics at one point, and she taught like these classes that people took to like I don't even know how you would classify them, auxiliary type classes where they would take to sort of
like supplemental.
Like they were really like useful in real life. Like in middle school she taught occupational investigation, which literally was, hey, I'm probably not really going to college. Let's figure out.
Kind of like the trade classes.
Yeah, and then my mom did this. She always did these sort of supplemental things. She taught new parents as teachers, was a pilot program in Texas for a little while, and she would literally go and meet with new parents in our community. And for the first 3 years of their kid's life, she would periodically make these home visits, and they would have these little seminars and tell parents what to expect and answer their questions and all these things. And it basically helped parents be better parents so that in those developmental stages of a kid's life, they were getting all of the necessary things, and you were able to also see if somebody was falling behind developmentally or things like that. So it was a pilot program that she did. And then years later, she ended up helping teens who got pregnant graduate high school. Like she worked for that program.
Wow.
So she did all sorts of like.
Wow, that is really doing the Lord's work.
I mean, it was weird.
That is a valuable contribution to society.
Yeah. No, she always had this sort of angle on life and education that most people didn't. Most people, it was much more straight down, and hers was always some sort of abstraction of that.
Yeah, and then also if you're getting the pregnant teens graduate their diplomas, then you're feeding the other class
Yes.
of the new parents.
Although that had ceased at that point.
Ah.
Yes, Texas isn't noted for its. It did do a pilot program, and it was impressive looking back on it. But they canned it.
Mhm.
Also, they're like,
Yeah, they're
we can't quantify how that's helping things. So since there's not a monetary number we can put on that, we're just gonna cut it.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of those like uniquely American things that happens. It's like, well, this is a really interesting idea, but it's not. We can't figure out how it makes money, so we're not going to do it.
Yeah, America has a hard time wrapping its head around things that you can't count.
Yeah, or even something like the Concorde jet. Now, granted, they were like blowing up and catching on fire and stuff.
Well, if you look past that. Terrific idea.
Yeah, just being able to land somewhere before you've left, but that ended up taking the explosions out of it. That ended up being like a non-profitable venture.
Yeah,
because for the amount that it costs versus how big the plane could be, the math didn't work.
Yeah. And I mean that's why the government has to do so much work. People are always irritated at the government, but that's why the government invests in all these different things, because if you're trying to make money, you're not going to get investment into these wild ideas. I mean, everything from the internet to like the push for solar and alternative energies has to come from a place that's like, we are going to invest time and money into seeing if this will work.
Yeah.
So that we can then get private organizations to actually do it, Yeah,
100%.
So that's why not only they hate the government, they hate, there's a lot of people that, they just hate anything that doesn't make money.
Yeah, it's just this circle, this chasing your circle of I'm mad at everything and nothing at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're growing up in Dallas,
Uh-huh.
and what is like, because
outside of Dallas, I grew up in a suburbia. Actually, the town I lived in grew up with me, so it was rural when I was a kid, and slowly became suburbia.
Gotcha.
It was about 20 miles from Dallas.
That makes perfect sense. People from Chicago are the same way. If you say you're from Chicago but you're from the suburbs, they don't like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up in a really small town too. I think I had like 400 people in my high school graduating class.
See, that's I think we only had 350 in ours. So yeah,
you beat me there.
Yeah.
Okay, so small town kind of an effectively small town growing into a suburban kind of experience.
Right.
Now, based on, I'm always interested in like what drives people to creative endeavors. Like when you were in high school, were you a creative kid then? Were you the artsy guy? Or I mean, you look like you could have played sports.
I did. I played football and basketball, and that was my thing. That was baseball. I thought that was what I wanted to do, was be a professional athlete. I mean, since my size and talent dictated otherwise, so I definitely had to can those dreams. But I was also in the AP classes and stuff like that, and I also sort of discovered comedy just as like, it was a weird thing because it wasn't ever this sort of like, I didn't watch it a bunch on TV. I wasn't like big into like Letterman or anything.
You weren't like watching late night. Yeah.
No.
Every time I hear people say like they just grew up loving like late night show hosts, that seems so alien to me, because that's just, I didn't discover those guys until much later. When I was like an adult.
I didn't either. My parents, I guess, watched the Tonight Show sometimes, but I don't even really remember that. I remember we just watched TV sometimes together. I remember
Do you remember when you first conceptualized the idea of what stand-up comedy was? Because I remember for the longest time, to me, the only stand-up I had heard before I got into college pretty much was Bill Cosby and Jeff Foxworthy.
Okay.
But then later it was probably a friend of mine showed me Dimitri Martin's Comedy Central Presents, and I was like, oh, that counts.
Yeah,
because
his is definitely a weirder version of. I mean, based on what the standard stand-up comedy thing would be viewed as.
Yeah, if you look at just like a storyteller.
Yeah.
Or Foxworthy, who is doing like I think slightly longer bits, and it's very much couched in like his persona.
Yeah.
That was mind blowing to see a guy like
Yeah.
Dimitri Martin and then Mitch Hedberg and all these folks. So did you have a moment where you're like, oh, stand-up comedy is that?
Weirdly enough, the two that I remember distinctly in my childhood, one was Eddie Murphy. I forget which one, maybe both, I forget. But I remember seeing it and being like, that's funny. I know that's funny. I mean, like that. I thought that was funny. I also remember somebody brought in Steve Martin, tape, and like played it on a tape, cassette tape or something.
Yeah.
And I remember that when I was young, somebody brought it in school, and because he like cursed.
Yeah.
And I remember that was like taboo because I was very conservative, very Christian environment. But weirdly enough, one of the first, my parents, we all sat down and listened. They had a record player.
Oh yeah.
And we all sat down and listened to an LP of a Christian comedian, and his name was Mike Warnky, and he was a storyteller. His first comedy thing, and I've gone back and listened to it actually since then, and it's interesting because it's sort of dark.
Yeah.
Because it was all about like he was trying to run from Christianity. Like his whole life he hated Christianity. It's because he had been raised in this really strict but like ignorantly strict Christian.
Sure.
But it was foster care. He kept moving from foster home to foster home. So he got like a sampler of all of the ways to do religion wrong.
Oh wow, yeah.
And then once he gets out of this foster care, he's like nothing to do with it, and he's like doing all these things, and then he's drugs and everything, and so he ends up in a drug-addled haze, signing up to go to war. He ends up in boot camp, and I forget what it was, but he broke it down. He's like, "There's all these sections," he says, and he said, and I knew there were 2 Christians in the whole thing, and there was, and he said, and there were like 80 of us, and they, but they were split off in the barracks, and in the barracks you had this, and in each section you had just enough space for a certain amount of people, 3. And he said, and I got both of them. And he said they weren't like the Christians he had grown up with. They were Peter and Paul. They were like the most devoted disciples of Jesus type Christians. Like they were just kind and just wanted to share the love of God. And he said that and he went through this whole thing, and it was this real dark story. I listened to it and I was like, some of this is as funny as I remember it. Some of it's not as funny as I remember it.
Sure.
But like, it's sort of cool how it was couched in he did a second album that was just a bunch of corny stuff. That I was like, okay, you're done. That was your thing. It's over. No, I mean, I'm sure he was making tons of money at that point.
That was your opus.
Yeah, that was your opus. Now you're Larry the Cable Guy with a message.
Yeah.
So that's sort of what it became. But that was sort of weirdly enough the first time that I'm like, I didn't want to laugh and I laughed. And while I don't think intellectually that clicked, there was a thing that I respected about that. And to this day, I sometimes will remind myself, I'm like, what we do as stand-ups is we go to a place in people that they can't even access by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we go, here, let me unlock that for you.
Yeah.
And it is one of the greatest magic tricks on earth.
Yeah.
To be able to elicit this animalistic response
Mm-hmm.
that if you do it well, can't be controlled.
Yeah.
And if you can get people to that, there is something ethereally beautiful about that.
I think so. Like watching like one of the first stand-up specials when I started diving into stand-up specials is when I saw Chris Rock's early stuff. And I saw I think it was Bring the Pain.
Okay.
And he's doing he's doing that classic black
Yes.
people versus, and then he gets to this one line and the punchline is real dumb, and then you just cut to a crowd shot and there's this guy in the front row, just his eyes are closed, he's just laughing so hard, like he couldn't stop if he wanted to. And that's the often forgotten magic of this art form that I think gets caught up in, again, like trying to raise social media engagement and like more kind of careerist kind of thinking.
Right.
It's fucking beautiful, man. And now, did you start stand up in Texas?
No, I started in New York. I actually moved up here with a job.
And what was it?
I went to school at Texas A&M to be an engineer.
Nice.
I graduated, got a job in a chemical engineering company, and transferred to Massachusetts and then to New Jersey.
Oh, yeah.
And hated my job.
Mm-hmm. What part of Jersey?
Jersey. I was in Morris Plains and Madison, New Jersey.
I have no idea where that is.
Pretty close. They're like 25 miles from New York
Okay.
City.
Okay.
I actually went into New York City, started taking acting classes to meet women because I knew nobody up here. And I knew when I was about to graduate college that I was not doing the thing I wanted to do.
Right.
I was like, I
this
don't
ain't
belong here. I don't know why, but I know I don't belong here.
Yeah.
But I'm here. I don't have the kind of money where you can go, I'm starting over.
Sure,
I was
sure.
like, I gotta just graduate and go to work and figure this out. And so I took a job with a company that I knew would do two things. One, not really stimulate me, and two, make me leave Texas. And both of those things happened.
Gotcha.
And so because of that, I hated my job. Got up here, started acting, went and auditioned for a community theater show in Chatham, New Jersey. Got it. Got bit hard by the acting bug.
Yeah.
And within 9 months had quit my job and was doing a little traveling show and running out of money quickly.
Oh, wow. So you basically, you moved up here, found the thing, and then we're doing the thing relatively.
Yeah,
short
it was
period of
weird
time.
because I literally took I did that to meet women.
Mm-hmm. I
really
started
cute
doing
women
theater
in
in
the
high
class.
school for the same
Yeah,
reason.
absolutely. And very cute women in class. Met them, still friends with them. But while doing that, I was like, I'm this is easy for me to do. Like, I feel like I have a knack for this.
Yeah.
And so I just was like, I saw I'm looking through the local paper in New Jersey, and they're like, we're doing an audition for this. And I faked. You had to fill out a resume on the paper when you did it, and I just listed like camp counselor jobs I had in college as if they were acting jobs. Literally, it was a 3-man show. It was called Complete Works of William Shakespeare Abridged. It's a great show, actually. Got really fortunate with that because I think that helped sort of catapult me into that world.
Right.
The guy told me later on, he's like, you got the gig because you could scream like a woman better than anybody who auditioned, and that was what it was. So that's what got me my first acting gig, is the capacity to scream like a woman.
That's fantastic. I got cast in Crazy for You in high school because I could pick an upright bass up and play it like a
There
guitar.
you go. Nice.
You know, sometimes it's
You
just,
go with your skill sets.
you got a skill set.
I don't know that
to
either
fit.
of those two skill sets are going to benefit either of us at any other point in our life, but we happen to have them at that
the exact right moment when it
confluence.
was needed.
Yeah,
It's like the Seinfeld episode where the whale is beach and it's like, is anyone a marine biologist?
right. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. Oh,
Just
one
so
of the great
perfect.
monologue speeches
Yeah.
of Seinfeld.
Oh my God, yeah, one of the best. I did theater also, and then did stand up later. So you're doing stage acting
Yes.
first,
Yes.
which I honestly think, now that I've been a stand up for almost 12 years, the times I've done plays, I found that my stage skills fed my stand up, and then my stand up skills feed stage if I were to act again. I feel do you feel any kind of synergy between those two skill sets?
I do. It was hard for me to connect them, though, because I had done so much acting stuff prior to going into stand-up, including sketch comedy and improv, and I'd done everything other than stand-up in the performance world, other than a one-man performance. So going into stand-up, it was much more difficult for me to translate those other skill sets. It was the longest time before I could do an act out. Because it was all words for me with stand up. It was all about the words, all about the words.
Oh, same here.
And then
one-liners.
But now in my act, I'll do these. I realized, and it was actually Dustin Chafin actually told me this. He said, "Look," he said, "there's a lot of Southern comics out there." He said, "That could be your niche, but don't just go for that to be just that's all you're doing." He said, "You're a good actor." He said, just react sometimes to what's going on in your set. And I was like, huh. And so it's weird because I was able to really enhance some of the dialogue in certain jokes and things like that. And I was able to find that sort of act out thing.
Yeah.
That I couldn't find before that time. And it was just him going, stop being an idiot and do it this way. It was one of those. But yeah, it was good advice.
That is good. He gave me similar advice, but in a much meaner context. He was one of the judges on my first comic strip audition back when they were mean to you.
Yeah, well, I was about to say, that's not totally his fault. I'm not saying that he might not have been mean, but
I've heard that is just kind of the nature of that situation.
That's what they wanted.
For.
Yeah,
that's what they wanted. Which I'm a little over the theme shows where the crowd has like some sort of like, oh, if the comic isn't funny, like physically or emotionally torture them on stage. This it's hard. I feel like the gig is hard enough.
Yeah, I mean,
you don't need like any other. You don't need to. I mean, like lording power over like a stand-up comic. It's like playing t-ball as an adult.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a world where, shows about dragons are the biggest thing on TV, and the second biggest thing is shows about people who want to get married in 30 days, So
yeah,
those two things just sort of smash up into like, oh, let's make it where somebody's pursuing their dreams and we rip them to pieces.
Yeah. Like a blood sacrifice.
Yeah, because people will love to watch that. And you know what they do?
Oh yeah.
Mark Cuban once said he said, look, he said, that's the nature of the beast. He said, people love NASCAR, and it's not because they love cars.
Yeah.
They love carnage.
Yeah. Carnage.
That's what it is.
And death.
People love car racing because of death and carnage. And we sort of, but that's true about almost everything. We love to see things.
How many people are watching UFC for good hold technique and takedown?
Yeah.
No, you want to watch someone get their skull kicked.
Right. Yeah, I I doubt there's many people out there watching that going, all right, let's rewind that. Let's watch what he does here. Let's
Yeah.
watch this thing.
Yeah, let's look at the technique. You see,
No.
if he does it there, no, it's like oh, the blood is everywhere.
Yes, that's what people want. They want the carnage.
They do. So they want that sort of like poke the court gesture and send him through the hole in the floor. So how long from doing stage acting did it take you to get to stand up?
It was probably 5 years, maybe.
5 years?
Yeah, that I was doing that. And I had, I booked a commercial in there. I actually had done some films, some little tiny things. Nothing of well, I take that back. The commercial was actually really cool, but nothing else was of monetary value, really. But
right.
But I had,
a gig.
But I had, I had been doing a lot of stage and a lot of film, small film, student film, junk like that. So,
just kind of getting on backstage and like, okay, I need, who needs, what do I fit? Credit copy and a meal, I'll do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again,
so you just
putting the reps in.
You took everything. You took everything that wasn't ridiculous, and several things that were.
Oh yeah, I remember auditioning for this touring Shakespeare company twice and not getting it, and then I also submitted for this like, it was actually in Pennsylvania. I remember submitting a couple times for some sort of like Christian theater company.
Yeah.
Not because I believed it, not because I was like really, dedicated to the mission of what they're trying to do, but it said paid. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it's weird. I was at the point where I was oftentimes paid was cool, but right after I got that first role with in that first theater role that I auditioned for, I had 2 more jobs, and my third job was had joined Equity, was a member of this touring troupe.
Actors Equity?
Acting, yeah.
Could I ask you, how do you qualify for Actors Equity?
You have to be in an Equity production, and you either have to have a smaller role and be in multiple Equity productions, and slowly and build up to it over like 3 or 4 maybe. Or, as happened with me, is I auditioned for their touring group, which was an equity touring group, and so I was the lead, and so I was immediately in Equity.
Right.
So I got really sort of fortunate as far as that goes. I will say, to be honest with you, is that it has not really paid any dividends since then, and weirdly enough, I made enough money with that it made me think I was going to be okay, but once the engineering money was not coming in anymore, I was quickly not okay. So I had to come up with other ways to make money. So, to be fair, there's very little that Equity has done for me. I mean, I still pay dues, and it there was a stretch of time where it could help you get into SAG. And I was looking at doing that, and then I booked that first commercial, and it was a SAG commercial.
And is that a situation where it's either they do a union and non-union call, or do you just go and say, hey, can I, once you see all the union people, can I audition?
No, it's you are submitted by your agent, and you go in, and if you're non-union, you're still going in for the union role, and you go in with a bunch of people who are union, and conceivably a few people who are non-union. But most of those people are probably union already, and if you get the job, you basically, I think you can get 2 jobs before you have to join.
Yeah, then you become must join.
Yeah. So I got that job, and I was so excited to be SAG, to be able to join SAG, and also so delusionally hyper confident that I was just going to continue booking like crazy all the time.
Sure.
That I was like, I'm joining SAG right now.
Yeah.
And this is going to change my life. It did not. It has since been good. Like, I will tell you right now.
I've seen you on Oranges.
Oh, yeah. Black. No, I make most of my money doing commercials and acting. That's how I make the bulk of what I make.
That's very cool, man.
Which is great.
Yeah.
It's awesome. And I have health care through SAG right now, so it's like good.
Beautiful.
It's really nice. But at the time, that was my first thing, and I'm like, it's really just a matter of time before I'm famous, you know? I mean, that's this weird thing that you're sort of fed. You're like, well, this is how I've seen people. I've seen people, they're on a major commercial, and it was a Budweiser commercial. And weirdly enough, it still to this day is the most magnificent commercial shoot that I've been involved in, because they flew us to Prague. And we just stayed in Prague for 5 days, shot for 4 of them, just wandered around the city and toured it for another
and I've
day.
Heard Prague is a very cool city.
It's a cool city. It's a really cool city. It's old, you know, architecture and everything. So it's old world, you know, but like really cool city. And I just get flown there first class and paid an insane amount of money, and that commercial ran in different ways. It was Budweiser. It ran for like 3 years in different ways. The smart thing I did was I didn't quit my job that I had at that point in time, because had I quit because I was like, we'll just see how things go. And I didn't book anything for the remainder of that year. I'm like, I'm going to hold on to my job, which was a good move.
Yeah, that's probably what I would do. I've talked to lots of guys in bands, like in punk rock bands.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, I think with a couple of exceptions, are mostly like at the stage where they're full-time, part-time is the phrase used, where they get offered these great shows, and you know they're paid to go over there, they get paid decently, but you know they still have jobs that they like, that they still have jobs as well. I feel like I'm sort of in that place. I just have to start, like, you know, get the voiceover demo done and then get the voiceover agent get that part figured out.
I mean, doing everything you can while also making money however you can, you know?
But that's awesome, dude. And I've seen you, like, I saw you in that Geico commercial, and then the snake bite.
That was actually
commercial.
also a very fun. We filmed that in a swamp, and I basically that was 18-year-old Jason. Everything I used to do for fun, driving trucks in the mud and running through swamps and stuff like that. And I got paid to do everything I did as an 18-year-old. I remember going, this is sort of cool.
Yeah, my first paid theater gig was a children's show in Arlington, and I think driving from Maryland to Arlington, I kind of netted out, but I was just so excited to be, like, going to rehearsal and then like getting in costume for the show, and I'm not the greatest with kids, but kids are just fucking enthusiastic about everything.
Yeah, they like it's so cool when you see kids that haven't seen theater see theater, and you're like, oh wow, you know what? We sort of try to put it into this box, and it's not. I did this show in New York where I played a gay guy. And it was written by I forget the guy's name, Richard Greenfield, maybe. I may be getting that wrong. Anyway, but he's written a lot of stuff. He's won Tonys. He's a very Upper East Side.
I'm
New York.
Picturing.
Yeah,
I'm
he's
picturing the
very
old school kind of like
it's very
rich
like
part of New York kind of guy.
Fine-tuned, and there's so many words that I can't think of right now, which is ridiculous. But yeah, he's just a socialite, you know, that sort of. And so his characters are very well spoken, and they're very. And there's always gay characters, and this was a story about this guy who just found out he was sort of on the front end of the AIDS epidemic, although they didn't really note it. They didn't say exactly what it is, but he was getting sick. He was going to get sick. And he had realized that, and so it was him facing that, and they're in the Hamptons. It's set in the Hamptons for part of it. So it's just what you're like, this is not for everybody. This is very much a theater piece, you know?
Sure.
Then I remember, and it to this day may be the greatest single moment I've ever had in theater, is we did this for a group of inner city kids. And so we did a daytime performance for a group of inner city kids, and there's this moment in the performance where me and the guy who was my love interest, we kiss.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just this momentary peck and this, this sweet little moment. And I remember during the course of the whole thing, there was all this bickering with people, and they would snap at each other and do things like that, and
Sure.
and the crowd, they'd be going, "Oh no, she didn't." Oh, I mean, they would just be
Yep.
jump, and it was great.
Yep.
And like there's this energy in it that it was great because it was sort of in the middle of the run, and you were sort of getting fatigued with because you're doing it all the time every night.
Sure.
And so it gave this energy to it. But when we were there and we're sort of right beside each other, sort of on top of each other, and I just lean in and we're eye to eye, and it's just, I mean, so close, and you just hear the energy of the room going, oh, and then when we kissed, that theater exploded. It was insane, and to this, I'm smiling from ear to ear. It was still
I'm right there with you, man.
one of the greatest moments, because they were just like, oh, yeah, and they were excited for it, and it was just this like you don't give people the credit that they're all wanting to connect to humanity.
Yeah.
And sometimes we go, oh, this group isn't going to like me, or they isn't going to like this piece, or what. No, it's just humans connecting. All of it is. And sometimes you have moments like that you get to experience that, for the rest of my life, I will always cherish that.
Yeah.
And I didn't get paid much at all for that job.
Oh.
So, and I will cherish all of that more than any of that thing that I got paid for 3 years and they flew me to Prague for. Yeah, that theater moment where I probably, over the course of that whole performance, I probably made less than I made as a stipend, less than my trip over to Prague cost.
Yeah,
that's probably how much I made.
Sure. Yeah, but to have that kind of an experience that you're just going to carry with you.
Yeah.
You can't
way
put
more
a dollar
valuable.
amount on
way
that.
more valuable.
100%. I love this kind of shit, dude, because because you just kind of chase. I'm just always kind of chasing moments like that. Like the first time, like I had this was a couple years ago when I was working this really like crappy call center job, and I had a gig in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea how I was going to get there. I looked at the Google, and it's like take a ferry to a bus.
Right.
And it was raining, and so I take the ferry, and then I'm just completely lost, and I end up walking up these stairs that are basically on the other side of a PATH train station.
Right.
Up like almost a sheer vertical cliff face, and then I walk for 2 hours in the rain to a bar somewhere in New Jersey, and then I have this great set. I have the kind of set where I not only do all of the jokes hit, but I shut up the like resident bar heckler.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Really easy, really quickly, and then a guy buys me a drink after the show, and that felt pretty good. And then some other comics on the show like, no, dude, we know where to get the bus. Let's just take the bus back to Sydney. I was like, there's a bus. And it was
That's great.
It's just like one of those things that like, kind of keeps you going when like you're just kind of in the middle of it so much.
Did you record that set?
I think I still have it somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a set that in Dallas. I actually did it in Dallas, and there were these heavyset black women in the audience who were so good at laughing and just so synced into everything I was doing, and man, from the beginning. And I remember listening, because I do listen to all my sets after I perform.
Yeah.
So I remember listening to that the next day, and I remember welling up. Like I almost cried. It was so like beautiful. And I mean, I will tell you right now that if I see large black women in the audience, I am so happy now for the rest of my life. Dude. And to be fair, that is generally true in comedy. Large black women love to live that moment of the comedy that you are putting out there. And so if you sink in with them, It's the greatest thing, and I that set I still will periodically play.
I agree with you 100%. My other favorite reaction from big black women
Yeah.
is if I can get a big black woman to call me stupid.
Stupid, yes.
I know
that's
that
huge.
I know that I'm killing it.
You're stupid.
Yeah,
one of
if,
those.
If I hear that, I'm just like, I got you. I'm going to show you how stupid I can get.
you know what's great is I get that from like sometimes you'll have a younger person like even millennials some but sometimes even younger than that and black or sort of a hip sort of a somebody who's been in New York City. I feel like I connect like who's always grown up in New York City and is just sort of like knows all the
like an old school New
yeah
York
like
kind of
yeah
character.
like New Yorican. That's what that's how I think of it, like New Yorican,
Yeah.
like that when they say stupid. But what I love is like they don't want to laugh and they go stupid and they shake their head. I'm like, that's a laugh.
Yeah.
That is a laugh.
Yeah.
And if I do it, if I see it, I'll call it out. I will.
Yeah.
That's a great thing.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite reactions. I had this set once in Tokyo.
All right.
A couple of years ago in Shinjuku in a British pub.
Okay.
So it's like tucked in amidst all the pachinko parlors and all that kind of stuff, like
Okay.
pretty happening spot.
Yeah.
And the show was the same night we landed. So I'm coming off of like a 14-hour flight.
Oosh.
And the host introduces me, and I go up and then I say, if I pass out in the middle of this, just throw a blanket over me and continue the show. And I just had this amazing set. I had great crowd work with this Scottish lesbian couple that were in the crowd, and I did this joke about guns that does well in America, but it just got this huge pop that
Really?
it never gets.
Yeah.
And it was like my Bill Hicks moment.
That's such a great thing. I mean, and comedy does give you those little moments that you're like, look, most people won't ever know that I experienced this moment, but I do.
Yeah.
And that's in here forever.
That just comes a part of that
Yeah.
story. And it's the kind of thing you don't get completing like some spreadsheets
Right.
successfully.
You
Yeah.
can't, I mean, you can make all the money in the world and you will still not ever know that joy
Oh,
at that level.
absolutely,
It's just a
man.
whole other thing. It is. You've connected with that other person on such a crazy, on a level that just most people don't ever get to connect with people on.
Yeah, man.
And it's great. And when it's a whole room, it's like you're transcending something,
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. It's great.
It's pretty rad.
Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to ask you before we get
Okay.
out here, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come talk to me, man, because it's been
absolutely,
great
man.
catching up with you again. Did I see on your website that you were in like a comedian heavy version of the Pillowman?
Yes.
Okay, because a couple of things. I've been really into that play for a
great
while.
play.
It always comes up in college, high school. I've never performed it, but I've seen it a bunch of times. And I also have this theory that like a comedian cast doing a theater piece would be a great thing to do. So what can you tell me about your experience with that?
I will say that it can be a great thing. The difficulty with comedians is you have to have a connection to it, and
Right.
and sometimes you're capable of that. You get people who are gifted at acting, can pull off connection when there's not an actual connection. The great thing about this production is we actually produced it.
Oh, cool.
And we did it because here's what happened. I love The Pillowman. I saw The Pillowman when it originally came out on Broadway. I loved it so much. To this day, the greatest play that I've ever seen or read ever.
Yeah.
And I loved it so much that it had, the original production had Billy Crudup in it. It had Jeff Goldblum played one of the guys. Phenomenal. Michael Stuhlbarg, who's been in a ton of stuff. Yeah, everybody would go, "Oh, that's that guy from the thing."
Yeah.
Great production. I loved it so much. Didn't have much money at all. Took people to see it still because I was like, you need to see this play. You need to see this. So I saw it 3 times. I took my dad to see it. That's one of the greatest memories I will have of my dad is he came to New York for a weekend. We saw a Yankees game. We saw The Pillowman, which is the greatest play ever.
Yeah.
And we went and saw a random improv show at the Magnet, and Mike Myers stopped in to be a guest performer.
Holy shit!
It was it was crazy.
Great
It was
weekend.
a amazing weekend. And my dad still to this day is like, I don't like New York, but still, he saw the best of New York.
Yeah.
I think it's the other parts he doesn't like.
Sure.
But it doesn't matter. But nonetheless, so I loved that play from the beginning. I saw this place where I had done this play by Richard Greenberg that I told you about earlier. It was doing a production of The Pillowman. And once you have done a production there, you're sort of grandfathered into their audition list. So they sent out a thing, we're doing The Pillowman. I'm like, I'm going to audition for this.
Yeah.
So I go and I reread the play, and I decide I'm going to audition for this character. And at this point, I have a mustache. So I go to audition for Ariel, who's like the policeman.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's one guy who's sort of a policeman, a bulldog guy, and there's another guy who's like a detective. He's a little more astute, a little more erudite. And then the third main character is the guy who's the prisoner, the guy who's being questioned, the guy. So those are the 3 main characters. I connect with this character. I'm like, oh, yeah, this is totally my character. Just the right amount of, like, angry and funny and stupid, but, like, connected to humanity in a different way. Like, he has a level of understanding that does – it's not an intellectual level. It's just this connective level. A street cop, you know, just your standard, like, you know – street smarts. Street smarts guy. So he's that. Loved it, connected to it, go and audition for this. The audition, I get a lot of laughs in. I just hit every comedic part. And it's a dark comedy. It's a really dark comedy. And most people who do productions of it tend to really get the drama of it. But they don't quite get the comedy of it. I didn't realize that at the time. So I go and audition for this, and I hadn't auditioned for a theater piece in ages. But I was like, this is so important to me. I do it, I get a callback. And I'm like, I'm on vacation when you're doing these callbacks. I said, I'm so sorry. I would love to do it. If for some reason they extend beyond this, please let me know. So I go on vacation. I get an email back. They're like, look, we would like to have you come back on this date, which is after you're back. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So I go back to do it. When I get there, it's just my role that they're auditioning.
Yeah.
And it's these 2 other guys who I'm like, both of those guys could be cast in this role. Like, they look like this character would look. Like, different versions, you know. I go in there and do the audition, and we're actually in the space, and I'm doing it with the guy who was cast as both of the other major roles. So they've already been cast. I'm doing it in that space. My movement is so off. At one point, I've got my back to the director. I'm like, I'm not getting this role. I just blew it, just horribly.
Yeah.
Later on, I realized that I think the reason I got called back was because I got so much comedy out of the thing, and that's what is often missing from it, because we went back and saw the production. I took Luke Younger and Brad Howe to go see that production because I'm like, you got to see The Pillowman. You have to see it. So they go and see it. We walk out of there, and we all, to a man, go, that is a much funnier play than they made it. And we're like, they missed so much comedy out of that. And we're just talking about it. And so as we're talking about it, I'm like, yeah, I love, you know, Ariel. Like, I really connected to Ariel. Brad is like, I really connected to Couturian. And Luke is like, I really connected to Polsky. And it's like, oh my gosh. And so we're all in an acting class together. So we just decide in our acting class, we're just going to go through the entire play scene by scene by scene. So we performed the entire play over the course of, I don't know how many weeks, 15 weeks,
Uh-huh.
We just performed the whole play. We just put up each scene one after the other, one after the other. And we really enjoyed it, and we're like, maybe we should produce this. And so we decided we would, and we got a guy who was a really good theater guy, and it was such a great experience, and yeah, I loved playing that part. We may do it again sometime. Like every once in a while, I'll see Brad or Luke, and we both go, maybe we'll do that again, because it was this great experience.
That sounds awesome, dude.
Yeah, it was. I'm really glad we did that, and it still is. I love that play.
Yeah.
Martin McDonagh, the guy who did 3 Billboards, that's not even close to his best work.
Oh my God, dude, yeah.
In Bruges, probably his best film in
Mhm.
my
I like In Bruges.
opinion, and Pillowman is his greatest single piece.
I would have to agree. Yeah, I just
beautiful.
Think it's just everything. It definitely has everything that I enjoy. It's like it's funny, but also a little twisted.
Oh yeah,
and
it's
kinda dig
it's
that
a
kind of shit.
poem.
Yeah,
It is, and all of his stuff has elements in it that I like, but this is the one that it's just a little different than everything. The closest thing to it is In Bruges, actually, but even that's not. This is much more like a poem.
Yeah.
In Bruges is like a really thoughtful essay. This is a poem.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like there's spaces where there's no sounds, and you're still being connected to it, you know.
Oh, absolutely. And just like the craftsmanship of that piece. Again,
it's beautiful.
Just like it's like you're finished whittling and you've got like a tiny replica of Mount Rushmore.
Yeah. I mean, it's
so
magic.
Good. Yeah.
Such a great play.
Well, that's awesome, man. I hope you get to do. If you do it again and you have auditions, tell me. I've never performed in that. But
really?
Show,
okay.
so
yeah.
That's
yeah.
like on my. It's like that. I wanna be in a production of Rent in some way, and I don't even care if I don't make any money doing this stuff. I'm at the point where
that's
I could
the whole
just
thing,
do.
man. You know?
I'm at the point where I'm just like, what's cool? What's on my cool shit bucket list?
That is something that I think everybody in every walk of life should say, look, I know that there are things that will cost me more money than they will make me, or cost me money and not make me anything, but what is the thing I want to experience? Is it playing the guitar on stage? Is it telling a joke on stage? Is it being in a play? I do those things. I think just
Yeah. It's also why I'm playing bass in a band again.
Why not?
Why not? That's been really fun.
You gotta feed the thing in you.
Yeah.
There's a soul in you that needs some sort of sustenance.
Absolutely.
And I think we neglect that way too much because it's hard to count. It's hard to quantify.
Yeah. If there was a way I would compare it, it's like open mics are like muesli. Like that really high protein, healthy cereal.
Yeah.
And that's important. You do need to do that. Do that. But got to give yourself some artistic ice cream every now and then.
Yeah.
Man.
You got to just tickle yourself.
Absolutely. Well, dude, thank you so much for doing this. I'm glad that we got to catch up like this, and hopefully we work on something soon.
I know. Yeah, we definitely have to run into. Has it been 6 years? Is that what you said?
It's something like that.
That's
way too long. It was around the
long.
time that I started. I hit a point where I started going to other mics other than stand-up New York because I just started being far away. Yeah, man.
Yeah, we gotta definitely make sure we don't make it 6 years again. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
I agree.
I'm ashamed of both of us.
And I'm bad at. I'm pretty bad about keeping up with people, and I'm not past anywhere right now, so I've got. I'm not out late at night. I'm either usually doing this or I'm trying to learn the next song that
there you go.
the band's doing. But we're gonna do something, man. I like being around you.
I enjoyed it too.
I feel better when you're in the room.
Thank you very much. That's very kind. I appreciate it.
Thank you, man.
All right. Thank you.
All right, folks, that's our show. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. Thank you, Jason, for taking the time to come over and talk to me. I always enjoy when I get to talk to that guy. I just get a lot of positive energy and vibes from him. So I hope we get to work together and I see him at a show somewhere in the future. I also want to give a shout out to my supporter on Patreon at the awesome producer level, Mary Beth Mooney. Thank you so much for your support. If you guys want to get a shout out, even request a custom playlist for yourself, you can go to patreon.com/awesomedisaster, and you can check out the reward tiers that I have available there. I'm doing some cool, interesting, exclusive stuff that I'm only posting over on that platform. So check it out if you can. If you want to also help boost Between Awesome and Disaster, if you can go and leave a rating or a review on iTunes, I would greatly appreciate it. So thank you guys again for listening and for being here. I appreciate all of you. And I'll see you next week Between Awesome and Disaster. Take care, everyone.